Masters of Horror has arrived yet again. Before we get started, how about you press that subscribe button, give this video a like, and ring that bell so you know when I'm uploading my Masters of Horror videos. These always happen on Saturday. Time varies, but I do hope you enjoy being scared. This week's topic, as you can clearly see from the title, horror romance, all about that. Also, how to write it. There's a few tips I have from how I write my horror romance. Now, if you don't know what horror romance is, I can actually recommend 3 books that I like that are actually horror romance. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about what is horror romance. As you know or may not know, that is obviously a mixture of genres, horror and the romance genre. Now, not everyone reads horror. There's a lot more people reading romance, obviously, than horror. However, I really love the mixture of these 2 genres. That being said, it's obviously a niche type of mixture, given the fact that horror is made to scare you, make you feel horrified or creeped out, or whatever the case may be in these instances. And when romance, on the other hand, is about pulling at the heartstrings, maybe a romantic involvement of 2 characters, things like that. So mixing these 2 together can be tricky, but if done well, very interesting to watch and read. So, now, horror romance together, the idea of it is to give you the fear factor and also the romantic aspects. A good example would be Warm Bodies by Isaac Marin. Now, that one was a book that was adapted into a movie. So if you have not read the book, you can always watch the movie, or vice versa, or maybe you've done both. Warm Bodies is under the category that I like to call zombie horror, and it's a zombie horror romance. So that one's very interesting always, and it has been done quite a few times at this point. But I think Warm Bodies pulled it off very well. And Warm Bodies also has obviously a comic undertone, because some parts are quite funny, but it's also serious as well. So I think that one did very well. There's another one called Lord of the Last Heartbeat by Mae Peterson. That's another really good one. And The Wicked Deep by Shay Earnshaw. Check those out if you have not read them. They are both really, really good ones. Yeah, all 3 of those are really good ones, I should say. So yeah, horror romance is acquired taste, I must say, especially when I talk about other people liking it. I don't really know many people that reads it, but obviously someone does, because there's a good amount of horror romance out there. Shocking, I know. So when you have horror romance, you actually want a good balance between the 2. You don't want to go, obviously ignoring the romance and going completely horror, and vice versa. So a good horror romance has a nice balance of the 2. Now, I write horror romance, but I have not released any of my works yet, but I am working on it. So now that you have an idea of what horror romance is, I'm going to let you know about my concept of writing horror romance. Like anything else that's a mixture, you should definitely understand the 2 subjects that you are mixing together. That being said, you don't have to have written standard horror before, and by standard horror I mean maybe horror without any other genre mixing in with it. You don't have to have written standard horror, but hopefully you are somewhat well read into horror or watched horror films. You have a general understanding of what horror is and how to express horror in a story. That would be something that you want to do before you go and mix genres together. Also, same thing goes with romance. If you have never written romance, or you don't watch romance or read romance, this could be a little hard for you to pull off. Of course, you can have experienced romance, of course, but you still probably should do a little research if you have never written it before. Not saying you can't write something you don't know, and this whole comes back down to that concept of write what you know term that you've heard in the writing world. They're not wrong about that, but they're not saying that never write anything you don't know. The meaning pretty much behind that, in my mind, would be write what you know, meaning don't jump in feet first, pick up a few things and learn a little bit about what you're going to write about, especially if it's completely out of your area of expertise. So let's say you are a writer that only writes science fiction, direct science fiction, or let's say you are a writer that only writes mystery suspense or something like that. Let's say that, and you've never written a romance and you've never written a horror, and you decided you have a good story idea, but you want it to be, the tone of it is horror romance, you figured out, but you've never written it before. It's not going to hurt you to do a little research in those genres, especially if you have never done them before. I would say definitely that's my number one thing I would say to do. Just have a general understanding at the very least. And if you do decide to write a horror romance, that trying to remember the balance between the two genres is a very good focal point to go with. Meaning, you definitely want the scary in there, or the creeped out feeling, or the uncertainty. Definitely want that there. I'm not sure what your monster would be, or what the creature would be, or the human that is evil, whatever the case may be for this one. But you can't forget the romance, since that's also an aspect of it. It's just trying to figure out how you want to do it. Do you want it just to have an undertone of romance? Because if you're calling it horror romance, you kind of need to make sure that aspect's in there, and more so not just an undertone. You know what I mean? So that being said, like, I'm writing currently a mermaid horror romance. So I say mermaid because it gives you an idea, concept of what I'm developing. That's going to be in my horror compilation. But yeah, you can pretty much I can take anything and turn it into a horror romance, any story parts, like which characters you want to go with. But horror is my thing, so that's not too shocking. Yeah, so that's my number one tip to get you started if you're interested in writing horror romance. If you want more details on, how to maybe write fear, I have a video up already about writing fear in horror. The romance aspect, if you've written any romance before, then you should have that one, no problem. If you have not written horror and you're kind of questioning about how do I write horror, check out that video, where I do say that you should get to know your evil, whatever that evil may be, and understand where you're coming from with the moral of the story. And that's just the case with any story. But in this instance, where is this going with horror? Because horror could go either way. You can have everyone die. You can have some people die. You can have no one die. You can go completely just scare the bejesus out of people. And then nothing that big a deal happens at the end. Or you can have it be detrimental, and then you can have it be just devastating to people and they're never ever going to forget it. So building those type of things, that's a whole nother conversation that I definitely would love to have, because I love talking about horror. But yeah, so try to take what I said. Also, check out those 3 books that I mentioned. They are good reads and also give you understanding of a romance horror mixture. And maybe check out some movies. Look into some movies that are horror romance. That could be a little quicker for you too. And maybe some general study there will give you an idea of where you want to go with yours. Alrighty. I hope you enjoyed this week's Mischievous Horror Talk. I will see you next Saturday. Stay scared.